Oilers Nation every day, streaming live on the Nation Network YouTube, where we are 30 likes away from our like goal today. So hammer that like button if you're watching. We're in conversation with NHL insider Frank Seravalli. Let's talk about the Oilers. Frank, Jay and I got into a big fight the other day, sitting in these same chairs actually, about the Oilers blue line. I think it can get better simply because Darnell Nurse won't play this bad all season. Evan Bouchard won't play this bad all season. I think there's room for them to improve internally. And I don't think they need to go jump the gun and get a D-man right this second. Jay is on the side of go get Jacob Strickern right now. You should have done it yesterday.
I'm on the side of we have to stop saying that the solution is that the D just need to play better.
But the D do. Okay, we're not doing it. Anyways, what is your
that's not the solution. Like, sure, there needs to be some step up, but we need to make some roster moves to improve and bolster our defense.
So where I'm getting at here, Frank, is what do you think? Because the blue line has been a huge problem for the Oilers over the last couple of weeks here. Is the front office maybe, because I know we've talked a lot about they want forwards. They are looking to become harder to play against with their forward group. But these last couple of weeks, it should be showing them that the blue line is maybe a big hole. What's your take on all that?
So my take is that the Oilers front office, I believe, has placed a priority on forwards. And I think these last few weeks have given them some pause. But I think by the time we ultimately get closer to the March 3rd trade deadline, and you can say whatever you want about Ken Holland and the way that he's run this team to this point, but perhaps the patient approach that he's taken, not overreacting in terms of any one situation, especially this season, is maybe a benefit because you'll see that even out, I think, over the course of time. Tyler, to your point, I think, and to be fair, this entire unit needs to be better. And I think there's been obviously some really underwhelming play of late with Nurse. Bouchard took a really long time to get going. And I think you'd still like to see more from especially some of the younger guys. Niemelainen with the size that he has, Broberg and his ability, however that might work out, to see more. I still think when push comes to shove at the deadline that they're going to attempt to fill multiple holes. And I think part of it, I view it as sort of a three-pronged deadline. And the order in which they're prioritized is going to be really interesting. But if I were to guess right now, the way I think they're looking at it is finding a top flight center that you can add to this mix as the number one need and priority. The second would be a true defensive defenseman, a strong defender. Think along the lines of a Chris Russell, an Adam Larson, that type of defender. Maybe not as big of a splash as someone like a Larson, but in that vein, sort of like a Gavrikov that we see in Columbus. And then I think the third option and priority, which they probably could have addressed by now, and if you want to argue about the complacency of the Oilers, that they should have already done that, would be to find a piece for your bottom six that's difficult to play against, that adds a little juice, a different element, another dimension to your bottom six that you really need. And I think that's probably the easiest of the three transactions to make. And so that probably ends up being in the number 3 hole when you get to March 3rd. But do those other two flip between now and then?
Well, on speaking about the number 3 need, what are the types of players that you're thinking or referring to, specific names that we'd be looking at trying to get that meet that role?
So one guy that the Oilers talked a lot internally about, and I mentioned this on the show a couple weeks ago with Tyler, was Ryan Reeves. They had done a lot of homework and were actually, I think, pretty close to pulling the trigger. He went to Minnesota instead. That was the day before Thanksgiving in the U.S. They've been on a tear since then, and it seems like he's added a lot of energy. I know that they also did their homework and due diligence on Wayne Simmons when he was on waivers. But I think there's other players that are maybe less sort of big name, less headline, that have a different element to their game. Someone like a Zach McEwen in Philadelphia, or a good penalty killer in Chicago like a Sam Lafferty. Someone that just does something that you don't currently have in your bottom six, which seems to be a pretty homogenous group in terms of what they bring to the table.
I think that's a really good way to put it. I just want to circle back quickly to Gavrikov, actually. And there have been a lot of reports, and you've even said this before, like the Blue Jackets are looking for a first round pick for this guy. And I look at the price the Oilers paid for a guy like Brett Kulak and the impact he had. And you gave up basically a second and like whatever William Lagesson was a waiver guy at that point. I find it crazy that the Blue Jackets could potentially get a first round pick for Vladislav Gavrikov. To me, that would signal that this is a seller's market if they're able to get that. Is that a fair read?
I would say part of it has to do, Tyler, with the stylistic fit of the player. The truth
Yep.
is there's not many of them to go around and have that sort of physical edge that Gavrikov has. Um, it's interesting the way the market evolves, because a couple people had commented to me today watching Artem Zub sign his 4-year deal for $16.8 million. I made the joke. I was like, hey, that's good Branson money. And it sounds funny to say, but then the next part of the equation on Gavrikov is, well, the Blue Jackets are going to be asking for a first round pick because they got that for David Savard, and Gavrikov is better and younger than Savard. Savard went to Tampa and ended up winning a Stanley Cup, but he was basically playing third pair minutes when he got there. So there's so many parts to the equation, but my guess would be that there's enough teams in the market for that type of defenseman. Like Toronto is probably looking for the same exact style of defenseman that the Oilers are. That I don't want to say there's going to be a bidding war, but at some point, someone's going to have to give up a first. And I think this is a general commentary on my part about how the Oilers should view the trade deadline is trade everything you've got. Like, this is the year to go all in. You've got to really make hay. I don't care about your first round picks in 23, 24, 25. Other teams have done it. The Oilers have to get moving, and they really need to get in and and do some damage.